All right, let's bring in Florida Senator and former Republican presidential candidate Marco Rubio. Senator, very good to see you. Good to have you on the program this morning. Your reaction as you listen to all of this, and I know you have been spending the last 24 hours poring over the details of this story and trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, sadly, it's not surprising. What's happening is ISIS has long aspired to attack in Turkey for a number of reasons. One is they want to take it over one day, but the main reason initially is because Turkey is now participating in anti-ISIS operations and initiatives. And so the way they intend to strike on Turkey and actually terrorize the Turkish people is to hurt their economy, primarily tourism, which is why you see this attack in Istanbul and previous attacks as well. The airport, which is where tourists are coming in and out, centers downtown where tourists frequent. There was already a big drop-off in tourism in Turkey as a result of some of this instability. This will only add to it. I was actually at that very airport just about a few weeks ago. So this is an ongoing aspiration on their part. And let me just say, I actually talked about this a few days ago. I said that I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing attacks in Turkey. That sadly has happened. And I think you'll see more. ISIS clearly wants to be involved in Turkey. And while I know there's been no official confirmation or anybody taking credit, this wasn't the Kurds, the Kurdish elements within Turkey, I don't believe. They don't usually hit civilian populations. They usually hit, buses full of soldiers and things of this nature. Al-Qaeda hasn't shown a large propensity to be involved in Turkey, and so we'll wait for official confirmation, but suffice it to say I'm fairly confident that this is an ISIS-directed operation in Turkey designed to hurt the Turkish economy by hurting and scaring tourists away.
So what do you recommend? I heard Lindsey Graham talking last night with Greta saying that this is really a direct result of lack of leadership in fighting ISIS in Syria and eliminating the power structure behind it. So you've got the two-front war here in Raqqa, in Syria, in Iraq, and then how to deal with these incidents that just are cropping up pretty much on a weekly basis at this point.
Well, I think two things have to happen. The first is, yes, we need to go ahead and continue to hit their nerve center, particularly in both in Mosul and in Raqqa, which is where ISIS is able to inspire people to conduct these sorts of attacks and coordinate some of it. They have a pretty diffuse organization. In essence, they don't actually necessarily have to have people come to Raqqa. They're able to communicate and send people around and inspire these attacks. But defeating ISIS, continuing to rob them of territory, is a key part of it. The other, I think, that's really important is I think we need a closer and better relationship with the Turks in terms of intelligence sharing and the like. They're an ally, they're a NATO ally. But I have expressed in the past some concern that the Turks were not taking their ISIS threat as seriously as they should, primarily because they didn't want to broadcast to the world that they had an ISIS problem. They didn't want tourists not to come and people afraid to travel there. Well, my argument back has always been it's going to happen and you're not going to be able to cover it up then. So I hope we can improve our intelligence sharing with the Turks and military cooperation. And by the way, the presence of airstrikes from the air base in Turkey, which they did allow us to do and which we thank them for, is perhaps the main reason why ISIS has chosen to ramp up its focus on Turkey right now. And so, look, they're a good NATO ally in that regard. But I think there's more that can happen if we can share and work more closely with Turkey, along with other NATO allies, working closer with them as well.
I mean, you look at the strength of the work that's been done in Brussels to sort of try to wrap up some of these terrorist organizations, tons of arrests. It feels like we need that kind of intensity in all of these countries across Europe and here at home, and certainly the leadership from the top to make that happen and to send that message. I do want to get your thoughts on the Benghazi report, Senator, because I know that this is something that you feel strongly about as well. There's been a lot of discussion that this was too much money and that it didn't find enough new information. What do you think?
Well, it found a lot of important new information. First, it confirmed, including talked about this White House meeting that occurred, where the primary focus seemed to be about how to spin this politically. And let's not forget this happened in September of 2012, about 2 months before Election Day, and the fear that this was a terrorist attack could in fact undermine Barack Obama's argument. So the politics became, sadly, too big of a feature of what they were worried about in the White House. The second is the incompetence and the negligence on the part of the State Department to put these brave Americans into harm's way in Benghazi and not have enough security on the front end or the ability to extract and protect them on the back end. And the third is the unwillingness to do so. The unwillingness to send in the resources necessary. My goodness, even a flyover of American jets might have been enough to scare some people off for a while. Yep. They were unwilling to do any of it for any sort of military show of force, because they didn't want to offend the Libyans and what was then allegedly a Libyan government. And that sort of consideration, to me, I just don't understand it. I really do not. And they have to answer for it. So, yes, Hillary Clinton's allies will try to whitewash this and cover it up, but there is no covering up the incompetence and the immediate default to politics and our unwillingness and or inability to go in and save these Americans that they put into harm's way.
How is it possible that the Commander-in-Chief and Leon Panetta, the Secretary of Defense, say deploy, and then they leave for the rest of the evening, apparently, and then it feels like the State Department wrestles away the situation and decides that they're going to make the calls and that, in fact, they're not going to go in? How does that happen?
Because it's very typical, especially when there's lack of strong leadership at the State Department. It's very typical. People start saying, well, hold on a second, we don't want a bunch of soldiers and people with uniforms and American military assets deployed because it's going to offend the Libyans and their sense of sovereignty. Well, you know what? All of that is important until Americans are under assault or Americans' lives are threatened, and then none of that matters or should have mattered. So, in essence, I guess one of the things we learned from this report is the potential insubordination on the part of people at the State Department who refuse direct orders to respond and save these Americans, and someone needs to be held to account for that. And the buck starts at the top, at the State Department, and at the time, the person running the State Department was Hillary Clinton, who is now asking to be the Commander-in-Chief.
Important. Senator, thank you so much. Very good to see you.
Thank you.